Hello guys, I am Vitold and I got a broken GS. Well, somebody broke it and it seems to be a trend with BMWs recently. Last time I rode an F900 GS and it had a broken rear brake. Now this new 2025 R1300 GS with ASA automatic shift assistant that debuted in an adventure version of the big GS has its suspension broken. It's got this fancy lowering system and someone before me did something to it, which we don't exactly know what they did. But it got stuck in a lower position, telling us that there's a problem and it won't race. Great, and it's generally acceptable to ride, but I don't feel it turns the way that it should. And also I am scratching the pegs on it really nicely, until it ends up in a cry, but so far so good. Now, to make things clear, I've published my full honest review of the new R1300 GS some time ago, and I encourage you guys to watch it after this video, as I got in there through all the details of what this bike is like to ride. There's also my direct comparison of it with a KTM 1290 Super Adventure, Triumph Tiger 1200 and a Ducati Multistrada V4, which I have linked in a description. This video here is focused on the newly introduced aromatic transmission. I've heard that some won't allow for openly calling it aromatic, but it is. It may change gears entirely on its own with no influence of the rider, so in my books it's doing it automatically just like in cars. What I want to focus on is two things: whether it works well and what it's like in comparison with Honda Africa Twin system, the DCT, as I had huge hopes that BMW would show us something brilliant here, but you may be quite surprised. At least I am. So the way it works is that you don't have a clutch lever here at all, but instead of that, you've got a switch that allows you to choose between a fully automatic mode called D, like in cars, to drive, and an M mode that's engaging a semi-automatic manual mode, so manual mode in other words, in which you have to use the gear lever, which is located in standard place, in order to change gears up and down. To start the bike's engine, you need to be holding the brake, and to engage the first gear, you've got to pull the brake again or just keep holding it if you haven't let it go after starting the bike. And you simply push the gear lever down to switch to the first gear. Now we've got to decide if you would like to stay in the M, so again semi-automatic mode, or the manual mode, or if you want to switch to D and have it working fully on its own. So after startup it seems to not remember the last setting and it always starts off in M. You may switch between the two pretty easily whenever you want. Engaging the neutral happens by pressing and holding this switch here. Once a gear is engaged, the bike is not going to be rolling forward, unlike in most cars without an auto hold option. It's just sitting there ready to set off, but only if you start opening the throttle, so like in mopeds and like in Honda Africa Twin. Also, when you come to a stop, it's just sitting there, it's not rolling. So that's basically it when it comes to basic operation. There aren't any additional transmission operation modes to choose from, unlike in Honda Africa Twin, so your influence isn't as large as I feel it should be, at least then it could be, but it's said that the transmission is learning our styles. Not sure that this satisfies me, as my own style changes all the time, so it's impossible for any computer to learn, or any body to learn my style exactly. So let me say two things at this point. One is that it works and it's an automatic transmission indeed. And the second is that it's not something that I would like to have in any motorcycle, as it is simply very rough in terms of gear changes. And it's rough as the way it really works is that it's combining what quick shifter does with manually changing gears in the meantime. So you're basically riding a bike that could otherwise move the gear lever on its own, or utilizing quick shifter, just not using a clutch. And I just think that it's a bit slower in gear changes than the regular quick shifter, so the delay between the engagement of the gears is larger and everything is far less smooth, I think. And the bike, this particular bike, has had like over 2,000 kilometers already, so it's all good, and it's after the run-in period. It should be ready to go at 100%. So it's not, I believe, a case of a brand new unit of the bike during its first kilometers. It's also quite loud, all this, when it's changing gears sometimes, especially when slowing down and being about to stop, and then it switches in the end from the second to the first gear. It may also downshift even in a manual mode so that you don't kill the engine. So manual is manual, but it won't let you do something very wrong, and then it becomes at some points automatic. The gear lever works seamlessly with pretty much no resistance, so unlike in motorcycles with conventional transmissions, it is quite pleasant to operate, and whenever you use it, the bike will change its gears regardless of whether you are in an M, so manual mode, or if you are in D and the bike chooses the gears on its own. You may force it to switch gears at any time, and this is actually great. It still gives you control over what's going on, and you will need it, as the bike wouldn't work in a way that I would like it to work. Simply for two reasons. One is that rolling the throttle wide open won't mean that the bike will always downshift. Nope. There is a tremendous amount of torque in the GS, but not enough to accelerate as quickly as I would want to or need in some spots. So rolling the throttle open gradually makes the bike think that you are not serious. And if you do it then rapidly at some point, then yes, it will downshift. In my experience, usually just one gear, while it could more, and in such cases I would have to manually downshift again. Not a perfect scenario to me. The second reason that it's not the way I would expect it to be is that it may suddenly change gears during a lean and kick you slightly out of balance because of how rough the whole process is. I really am surprised that it happens in deeper leans as well, at rather still steady speeds or even slightly slowing down. We sometimes need precision when steering, so a rapid kick back or forward is not helping at all. Now, good aspects of it are that the bike will not stall, which otherwise may be a challenge with this particular two-cylinder boxer engine, and it has been in the past so far. So great, now we are safe. Now, the downside is that we don't have perfect control over how opening the throttle influences the engagement of the clutch and when the bike will actually start moving forward. I believe it's a matter of getting used to it, just like operating the clutch ourselves. But there is too big of a delay to me, while later on it's quite easy and nice to operate when already rolling. I did wonder how riding modes affect the gear changes, and after testing it out in road, dynamic and rain modes, I believe that there is no visible differences in how the transmission operates mechanically. So it still cuts power, changes the gear the same. Just in a dynamic mode, it may hold the RPM for longer when accelerating, and so changing gears up later. This, I believe, means even more shaking in the process. Now, in rain mode, it's a bit better as the RPM are low. In the road mode, I feel it keeps the RPM too low and the bike feels like it's suffocating in some circumstances already at some speeds, if you know what I mean, obviously. In dynamic, it may hold the gear ridiculously wrong, making a lot of noise and grabbing my attention before switching up. Annoying, but I understand that it cannot read my mind. That's okay, until it, let's say, learns as promised, but it won't, I think. My conclusion at this point is that I would rather it had some sort of settings like Honda Africa Twin that would let me choose how quickly or late I would like the gear changes to happen, a little bit more in this area. Two more comments here are that I actually feel much less in control in general. First of all, I would find myself pulling small power wheelies for much longer due to not exactly feeling what the bike is doing. It is much harder to close the throttle, just like in a moped or some electric bikes with no transmission. It's the way it is. I'm not a fan of that, while in Africa Twin the bike is less powerful, so it's easier to control in this area. The engagement of the drivetrain is still perfect. It's very smooth and direct, to the point of fast accelerations from a standstill, making it almost burn rubber, if not for the traction control doing its job. Second of all, my impressions are that due to our misunderstandings, the bike makes an impression of being slower than it is, not willing to downshift as aggressively as I would do it. Sometimes switching to a very high gear, it wouldn't let me ride as quickly and aggressively as I like to. So it's simply not for me. I realized that because of this, it's not really a solution for fun city riding, but rather highway cruises. And I'm sitting here in front of you guys with this thought. Yes, it may do better at higher speeds where the gear changes won't feel as rough as at lower speeds. But then, is it even needed and really that helpful if I've got to downshift every few kilometers to overtake someone quicker on the highway? I may need to do it largely on my own, and most bikes, including a regular R 1300 GS, have a quick shifter anyway, so I gain basically nothing except for having to wait first to see whether maybe the bike will give me what I want this time. Then if not, to take control and do it myself. The reason why I'm so definitive here is that in comparison to Honda Africa Twin DCT, so with Honda's automatic transmission again, BMW's solution is just much worse, with no upper hand in any area in my opinion. It may be a gimmick to show friends and then suffer when riding because there's no coming back. Maybe that's why it's an unpaid option, by the way. And I'm serious, I'm not impressed actually. I understand the idea, they've implemented it, but it just doesn't do anything well except for preventing the bike from stalling. Yeah, yet it doesn't balance itself out with the rough and uncomfortable gear changes right after that. I was shocked after the first gear change, which felt like a jump over a speed bump basically. Yes, it depends on the RPM, but even riding steadily and rather slowly, it's not very smooth. Actually, it's not smooth at all. Now about the Africa Twin, that I'm not a fan of as a model, but I'm absolutely stunned and now even more than before impressed by how mechanically flawless, and I mean really flawless, Honda's DCT system is. It has never happened that the bike would change a gear in a rough way at all, and I mean never. No matter what I would do to it. There is simply a proper synchronization in that bike, unlike in BMW, and this is a night and day difference in general feel. And changing gears is something that accompanies us all the time when riding a bike. Now, total smoothness in Honda is impressive and much more fun, as it may be simply relaxing and also still very functional. Then there are the modes that we can choose depending on how we want to ride, and they really offer a proper choice of settings that BMW is missing simply. So I can make Africa let me ride calmly and in a sluggish way when I want to, and we are both bored, but I may also switch to one of the more aggressive settings and have fun when accelerating. This influences when the bike changes gears. Maybe not so much how rough the changes are, as they're always totally smooth, but it may downshift using further gears much easier, and that's how it should be, I think. The thing that I feel may be to BMW's advantage is that Africa Twin comes with buttons on the handlebar for manual gear changes that are not easy, not very nice, and not intuitive to use to me. I'm not a fan of that solution. Now, BMW comes with a gear lever, which is a 100% intuitive solution for most riders. But the thing is that we can have it in the Honda too. It's just an additional option, which I haven't had a chance to try on the Africa Twin that I've been riding. But I would definitely go that way and get it if I were to buy a Africa Twin with a DCT. In the new BMW R 1300 GS with ASA, I feel that the only practical way to use this setup is to keep it in a fully automatic D mode and just regularly use the gear lever to just get where you want to be in terms of RPM and control over the engine instead of by default leaving it to the bike. It won't make the gear changes any smoother, but at least you'll have more control, less frustration, and some gear changes will happen when you'll want them. Some of them, yeah. I do think that this is a good idea to have an automatic transmission as an option, but I also believe that this here is just not a good product just not. And what makes me very convinced is the way they have done it at Honda, which makes it a night and day difference again. Fun fact is that this GS has an exhaust system that you may change the loudness of and the depth of the sound of. I've never seen anything like this on a motorcycle, but it works fantastic. The bike just pops super nicely when downshifting in a manual mode. Well, still it sounds a little bit like an old man coughing, but at least it's an old man coughing on steroids. It's very fun to be made. It's quite fun to actually be able to make it change the loudness just with the use of a button. Talking of gimmicks, well, what you see me on is a 7G11 electric office chair. Everything here is electrically adjustable. Awesome stuff. If you want one, go to powerseats.eu and choose yours. Now, if you want to know more about the R1300 GS itself or a Honda Africa Twin DCT, I suggest that you watch my full reviews of them that are linked in the description. And also, there is a comparison to other motorcycles, to all of them, including the previous GS, as I've ridden them all. So please, guys, do let me know what you think about this new system from BMW and the GS, and see you in the other videos.